I'm going to skip to the end because that was one of my last slides. You know what? We'll get to it. Never mind. So I was also asked to sort of do a level set, which is really the purpose of the discussion today, is to get people to understand what each of the companies is doing. But also I thought maybe a good way to start would be just to talk about how I think about the cloud. A lot of people ask, and usually the definition is kind of difficult, and I sort of thought about it. And perhaps one of the reasons that the definition is a little difficult is because you have to think about it along different axes. I think of it as maybe a set of functional benefits, a set of business benefits, a set of technologies that are involved in making it all happen, and tying it all together. So when I think about cloud, I think about elastic compute fabric. I think about being metered, being able to be charged only for the amount that you use. These are all functional benefits that the end users get. But really, something that's central to it is what we call pooled resources. In the sense that you have a pooled set of compute, a pooled set of storage, and as we'll find out, as you move higher up in the stack, you get pooled set of services, and even at the application layer, you can pool users in a multi-tenant SaaS model. And so that's really what's enabling this shift to the cloud is in terms of dropping the cost of usage, is the ability to pull resources together and share it across lots of users. When I think about the business benefits, the real value I think really comes down to three things: agility, which is the ability for businesses to deploy on demand, to turn on and turn off the amount of capacity that they're using, be able to provide services to anyone on any device anywhere in the world, and to be able to manage it remotely. Just to be able to do that without having to deploy a lot of resources yourself is a huge benefit in terms of getting to market quickly. The other, because of that, you have the ability to focus more on the business that you're trying to build, and finally, of course, because of reduction in costs, you can get to market on a cheaper basis. And then finally, I think about it in terms of technologies, enabling technologies that happen at every layer, and certainly virtualization at the IaaS layer is key. But even at the PaaS layer, there's a lot of services that become part of the fabric that becomes available, and I'll talk a little bit about that on the Azure piece, about how we enable the same sort of services to be accessed by different sets of consumers. So I would want to talk a little bit about, from a Microsoft perspective, how we view the cloud and how it's changing the business for us, and how we hope to change it, how we hope to enable it and bring it to the market for the rest of us. When we look at the cloud, when we think about our business, we think about what can we do with the set of services and set of products that we have and make it ready and available for a world where the cloud exists. So how can we make things like Office available on demand? So you can think about Office 365 or SQL Server available, maybe perhaps via SQL Azure on Windows Azure, or CRM available, Dynamic CRM available, well, via Dynamic CRM Online. And same thing, what we're hoping to do with the larger set of customers we have out there is to make our set of technologies available to them in a cloud context. And so when we think about what customers out there are using and consumers out there are using and enterprises out there are using, we think of it as a world filled with devices that consume lots of services. And these services tend to be always on, they're always connected, and they're composable. So if you dig beneath, let's say, any application that maybe you're using on your phone, maybe it's an application to check into a restaurant, and if you find a friend there, sending him a message, you will see a lot of the components that are used behind the scenes, being able to access session data and see who else is currently logged in, or being able to store data, the fact that you've checked in. A lot of those components are the same. They're reusable components, so why is it that everybody has to build, maintain, deploy, manage all those things individually? A lot of those things can be abstracted out and made available in a general context. And so that really forms a basis for a cloud strategy. And I'll talk about that in the context of Azure. In the last bit of it is really cloud on your terms. We recognize the fact that it's a diverse world. We recognize the fact that everybody's at a different stage of adoption for the cloud. Some want to be born in the cloud, some want to start in the cloud. Some are still, they still have assets that need to belong in the private context, in the enterprise context. And so there's also this diversity in terms of wanting to use packaged products versus open source products. And so we've decided that we want to meet developers where they are. If they want to use certain open source technology, we'll be happy to make them available. We've already provided support for Node.js and Hadoop on Azure from a enterprise and private cloud and hybrid cloud perspective, certainly what will be the underpinnings of the private cloud would be things like Windows Server and System Center. But even people who are willing to use a little bit of the public cloud and keep most of it on the private cloud, we have technologies that can help you connect to bits and pieces of functionality on Azure, either through things like database synchronization or being able to access resources on the local enterprise network or identity federation and so on. So I hope that gives you the sense of the fact that Microsoft as a company is pivoting and we're all in the cloud. This is really the focus going forward for everything that we do and everything that we want to do for our customers. So when I think about Windows, Azure, and there's probably been many diagrams drawn for all kinds of cloud platforms, and I sort of aggregated that into different sets of functionality. This is what I was referring to earlier. When you dig beneath the surface, there's sets of functionality that can be abstracted for different kinds of applications that is basically the same. So when we think about it, we think of an application composed of the ability to separate out the compute part that's application specific. So we have what we've defined as roles, worker roles and web roles. A web role is something that faces the internet. That's where the queries come in. That's where the requests come in, and it passes it off to something that does a bit more analytical work. Let's say in the context of a work role. And these are nothing but VMs running in Azure. They are just tailored for a certain purpose, being able to access certain functionality. Same thing with data management. We have different stories in terms of the kinds of data you want to store, whether it's relational data, whether it's key value pair through tables, or blob data for images and other multimedia data. Functionality around business analytics, being able to do reporting in SQL Azure, messaging between application components, or messaging between applications that are separate from each other, and so on. So for that, I hope I'm doing okay on time. I don't know if I'm running over, but yeah, okay. So, and this is, a lot of the stack is very much similar to a lot of the other cloud providers. I won't get into the details of it, but the bottom line is that we're building a lot of services that are core to the platform. We're inviting a lot of partners to build more services, either net new or composing these services and building new services. And they're available through a variety of sets of tools and technologies. And it's something that's an open platform. We are supporting a lot of sort of non-Microsoft technologies. Hadoop is an example, Node.js is an example, even tools, PHP, Java. So I will sort of leave that there for a second and sort of talk about, when you're thinking about which cloud platform to pick, a lot of times the discussion gets mired in discussing feature forests. This cloud platform has these functionality, this one has this functionality. And I think maybe it makes sense to up-level the discussion, really think about who's the partner that we're partnering with. What is the set of resources that they provide? What is their reach in the marketplace? And as you can hopefully tell, is Microsoft has a set of assets that is just it's just phenomenal that it has acquired over its history. Franchises that by themselves are multi-billion-dollar businesses themselves. So we've got Windows client and Windows Phone. We've got Search. We've got Office, SharePoint, Exchange, Xbox, gaming, Skype, Dynamics, and of course cloud, public cloud, private cloud technologies. Now the question then becomes: is this something that you feel that could be composed into a set of services, into a fabric of value that would make sense for you as an entrepreneur to use and consume, and be able to leverage the channel that Microsoft has going into the marketplace? And so that's really the question. I want to leave you with that question: is to think about the choice of a cloud platform, not simply as a matter of technology, but also as a matter of an ecosystem and as a partner. So, yeah. Oh, and I guess I'll take 30 seconds to give my plug about the program. So this is BizSpark, and I work for the Emerging Business team, which is a team that's dedicated to to stimulating the innovation ecosystem around the world and helping stimulate the local software economies around the world. So we're present in about 100 countries worldwide. And we work through network partners like incubators and government agencies, and we do direct events as well. And we do all of that under the umbrella of BizSpark. I'm sure a lot of people here have heard the name. I wonder how many people have heard the name. Not many people. Well, I encourage you to go to Microsoft.com/BizSpark. It's been out for about 3 years, and maybe I'll talk a little bit about it. It's really meant for companies that are young, less than 3 years old, less than $1 million in revenue, We give away free software, free support, free visibility, access to network partners, access to other resources that an entrepreneur would need. Part of that offering is also Windows Azure for free for 2 years, up to $60,000. It's a really good set of benefits, and it has tiers. So we've got a large the base, which is about 50,000 companies worldwide that is using it. A smaller tier that is focused on that we think are higher potential, that have more resources given to them, and then the sort of the top tier, which is BizSpark 1, which is composed of a different set of portfolios focused on different areas like mobile or cloud. There's people that are dedicated to that space. So I, for example, manage the cloud space for BizSpark 1, which is the highest sort of tier in terms of high potential startups that we work with. And so I hope that you will take the opportunity to go find out more about BizSpark. That's it. Thank you very much.
So I have my 30,000 slides. There's like multiple ways we can go about this, and I hate slides, so I have a few here in case we want to go there. But let's make it interactive. So how many people here know, actually frankly, have ever used or worked for a company that uses Salesforce? All right, about half of you. So for the other half, let me explain what Salesforce.com is and what the Salesforce platform is, and that's part of what I'm trying to do here. And second question, how many people are interested in entrepreneurship here? I mean, just because you're tired doesn't mean that you're here for, okay. How many are looking for jobs? Okay, there's a few. And how many people are just interested in figuring out where the industry is at and making investments and, you know, just getting a sense of where this whole thing is going? And lastly, how many people are just confused by this, like, you know, what does Salesforce say about cloud versus what Larry Ellison says versus whoever says what? Okay, so there's like 5 of us who are confused. So my hope is that let's focus on the questions that you guys have rather than, you know, what Salesforce primarily does, which I'll cover a little bit. The mic's gone quiet, but you guys can still hear me? All right. It's probably because I'm loud. We actually think that the cloud thing that, you know, a lot of companies have finally caught on to is real. And it's actually very simple to explain to people what cloud is. And I'll talk about the social stuff a little bit later. It's very simple. If you can go to a website and either for free or using a credit card, build an application, use an application, or get a service, then it's cloud. If you need to call a sales rep and get something installed, shipped, or you get an email that 40 days from now your instance will be configured, then in my book, that's not cloud. So it's a very simple definition. Cloud is when things are available to you the way your cable channel is available to you. You know. So that's my definition of cloud. But we think that the cloud journey started about 12, 13 years for us, right? When our CEO, Mark, asked the question, why can't business applications be more like how you buy books online, right? So kind of like what Amazon.com as a bookstore did. And he embarked on the journey. You could argue that, you know, it turned out to be one of the more successful cloud computing companies as a result. But we think, you know, in that process, we basically figured out that people wanted not just business applications that we built, but they wanted to build their own business applications. And that led to creation of a new term called platform as a service. The idea was very simple. Why do you have to buy a business application that only Salesforce.com builds? Why can't we let entrepreneurs here build business applications and take them to market and let customers themselves build custom business applications for themselves? So that's what we call, we use the name force.com for that. Basically, it's a Salesforce platform that people have been using to either build net new business applications for themselves or to sell into a marketplace. The name of that marketplace is App Exchange. So you can basically, reach 100,000 plus business customers that we have, and sell these applications to them. So that's what Salesforce's platform is at a very high level meant for. But times have changed. In last 3 years or so, there's a company that is going IPO, I suppose, in a month and a half, called Facebook. Came really into being. Unless you were still in college, you probably didn't hear of Facebook. I didn't, certainly, till 3-4 years ago, when everybody needed to be on Facebook suddenly. And then this other thing came up, which is called an iPad. And iPads didn't exist a few years ago. So there's been these two disruptions, we would call them mobile and social, right? So in fact, the TiEcon, I think, theme this year is cloud, social, and mobile. And if you think about it, one of those things didn't exist 10, 12 years ago, cloud. The other thing kind of didn't exist 4 years ago, social. And mobile, depending on your definition, unless you think a Nokia phone is a mobile platform, it didn't really exist till a couple of years ago. So those three things have come together, and it was not as if it was not sufficient to have one disruption create opportunity for us as entrepreneurs and pain for legacy vendors. Now we have three disruptions. And while we see the market and other players in the market finally admit the reality of cloud computing being real and coming all in and all that stuff, we think the market's moved ahead. Now it's about bringing social and mobile in conjunction with the cloud, and that's where the opportunity is. So, the biggest IPO of this year is not going to be a cloud computing IPO, right? How many VCs are funding non-cloud companies that are business applications anyways? I mean, that debate was settled a couple of years ago, right? The new thing is social and mobile, right? So what's Salesforce doing? Well, if you look at this pretty picture, we basically think that we went from process automation apps to web-based applications to mobile applications, and now this next decade or so is going to be this combination of cloud, social, and mobile. And if you think about it, these things are kind of dependent on each other, right? You couldn't really be social if you have to go home in front of desktop and say, I was eating at, Amber restaurant. You can't really be mobile if your mobile application has only one application, which is called phone. And you can't really leverage the power of the cloud unless that's available everywhere through connectivity, and that's where telcos and everybody else plays a huge role. So the combination of these things actually accelerates the other three. And that's where opportunity is coming and being created for you guys. So where we play in that market is we think that, this is IDC. I love all these predictions, and you understand these things. So for us, where we want to be as a platform player, and where we basically decided to be a player rather than trying to be all things to all people, is what we call the cloud application platform. So we want entrepreneurs and businesses to build their cloud applications on our platform. We are not in the business of virtualization. We are not in the business of selling you compute power. We think those are awesome things. If you have 1,500 CPUs running at 10% load, if you can run them at 80% load on 300 processors, that's amazing, right? That's value being created, value being saved, power being saved, trees being saved. But that's not the business Salesforce is in. We are in the business of providing a cloud application platform. If you talk to a lot of vendors, sometimes even analysts and such, or press, they talk about things in the future tense. The cloud is coming, the cloud is near, the social is near. People are going to slowly adopt a cloud. We think that's kind of us telling people that they'll eventually have a smartphone. How many of you here don't have a smartphone? Okay, right? So telling people that you're going to have these things in the future tense, we think is kind of not going to work anymore, right? And just like in your personal life, you want an iPhone and an iPad and all those things, in your business life, business users expect the same level of functionality. And whether you're a CIO or whether you're a CEO of a company that's being founded, you want your applications to be running on these modern platforms from day one. So a real cloud application platform from a perspective is things that make social, mobile, and real-time applications that you couldn't even build a year or two ago become real. So the classic message is that you have a choice. You have a choice between innovation and building these social, mobile, real-time applications, and being able to safely, securely manage this stuff and hug the servers that you have. And we think that's a false choice, right? We're seeing companies, whether it's Avon, A6, Zimmer. I'll actually jump ahead because don't have that much time. We're doing about 40 billion transactions a quarter. Actually, we're doing about 20 billion a month now. We've had 1 million business applications installed by businesses. So these are not number of users that are using the applications. These are the number of applications installed by businesses. We have 1.4 million custom applications built on our platform, deployed today, right? We have customers, it's not just Groupons and Facebook who actually use our platform too for their internal business applications and such, but you're seeing customers like Coca-Cola and DuPont and AT&T, Japan Post, Ministry of Energy and Trade and Information in Japan. These are the kind of customers that are going into the cloud and having business applications that are running and live today. Actually, some of them have been live for years. So, and we have all the major certifications, GSA, CISTRUS, all that stuff that none of us care about, other than the fact, as an entrepreneur, that you don't want to build a business on a platform where you have to go do the stuff that we've actually gone and done. So what's Salesforce platform consist of? We basically think of it as very simple. There's a database tier. Heroku is our platform for offering you Node, Ruby, Scala, your language of choice, and running it in a 3GL environment. And then you have Force.com, which is a 4GL environment, which is how you build business applications if you don't want to write code, if you want to basically use clicks, not code. So the closest analog I can have for that is think of Force.com as closer to Visual Basic or any other 4GL environment you've been used to. Some of you are older than 25 years ago know what 4GL environments are. Some of you are younger don't know what 4GL is. So Force.com is a 4GL environment. Heroku is the 3GL environment. Site.com is our website and content management system. But all of this is basically part of the Salesforce platform, and you basically decide to use the services and choices that you need. Basically, in closing, platform as a service is not a new market, right? It just so happens that there's actually very few players. So if you look at these charts, in platform as a service for developers, there is essentially 2 players in the leaders arena. When it comes to business experts, this is a 4GL kind of an environment where business users can basically build and modify business applications. And then platform as a service for ISVs, which is basically what entrepreneurs want to be. At least according to Forrester, there's only like a few leaders. So that's what we are betting our business on. We think this is where the market is headed. And it's no longer about the platform as a service only, it's about the ecosystem as was rightly pointed out. But we think it's an ecosystem of the 3 trends that are coming together, which is social, mobile, and real-time applications being built on modern platforms. So with that, thank you so much, and we'll take questions later.
Well, hello there. So, we're going to get out of here by 8 o'clock, and I have 22 minutes of presentation, so it's going to be a challenge. It's interesting. I'm going to be Tom Ryan, not the HP guy, for just a half a second. He did the 4GL thing. And I was thinking about cloud, just when you're talking about where things were born. I got my start in computers with Hewlett-Packard. This would have been 40 years ago. And when we're talking about cloud, it was kind of, what do we have today? We have mobile tablets and smartphones or feature phones, and then we've got computing in the sky. 40 years ago, it was an ASR-33 teletypewriter, and it was an HP 2000 in the sky, data center, and it was called time sharing. So it's interesting to see how not a lot changes. This is full circle. So for you old gray hair folks, we're talking about time sharing again. It's just modern time sharing. that would be my personal definition of cloud. But I'm here to talk about HP's perspective, what Hewlett-Packard is doing. And in the last, earlier this week, the company did a pretty significant press and analyst push in terms of defining HP's Converged Cloud. And we'll talk briefly about what that means. And I think it's important that you understand a company the size and breadth of Hewlett-Packard, what their perspective is on this, and it's slightly different than the previous gentleman. The Converged Cloud is really talking about the combination of traditional data centers, which HP is obviously an excellent IT service provider, but also private clouds, where people are building out clouds on their own infrastructure, managed clouds, where enterprises are putting cloud-like things in other data centers or other places for other people to manage, and then now we have public cloud taking over. So there's a natural evolution. Driving underneath all of this is really the business model of the enterprise, which is moving from a pure capital expenditure model to an OpEx, and I think most of you have heard about that. CapEx, you spend a lot of money for hardware. OpEx, operational expense, you pay as you go. And so the public cloud gives a company the opportunity to pay as they go. It's not that complicated. I'm going to skip all this. If you want to come back and talk about specific HP offerings, there are a whole slew of products. Hewlett-Packard has everything, as you know, from network routers up to mainframes, to Blaze, to ProLines, to tons of software in between, ways of putting that software together, and then now we're announcing a public cloud offering to round out the story. So the basic announcement on public cloud is we are in a private beta right now. It's been an invitation-only event. People can still apply. You can go to hpcloud.com. I'm not here to sell that, but you can just go check it out if you'd like. And then we've announced a public beta offering beginning May 10th. Pricing is available, so we can talk about that if it's important later on. I think we have a broader story that I really like to focus on, so you can read about HP's press announcements in the press. Then we also hear a lot about, or you read in the paper about hybrid cloud, and I thought I'd give our company's perspective on hybrid cloud. Talked about earlier, is it on-site, is it off-site, is that really the choice that companies need to make? And in fact, the customers that are coming to Hewlett-Packard are looking for choices, and they have applications that they tell me, quite frankly, we will never run this in a public cloud. We either have regulatory issues, we have in-country data requirements, we have corporate policies about what data, personally identifying information, can go into a public atmosphere or a public cloud, Salesforce platform, an Amazon platform, or HP's public cloud platform, and we're just not going to do that. So they will develop a private cloud because of the economies of, as you mentioned, virtualization gets you so far, and then there's the next step after that. Or they'll manage that data through their own securities, through their own mechanisms in a third-party arena or an independent data center. But some applications, and we'll call them workloads in a sort of parlance, definitely makes sense to move to a more public environment where you can scale and grow as your user base scales and grows, or as your data scales. Hewlett-Packard is talking to our customers, and our customers are resonating strongly with the concept of transformations, or being able to offer service, being able to have service offerings at each of these three sort of prongs. And there are plenty of opportunities for entrepreneurs, for startups, to help Hewlett-Packard, or more importantly, Hewlett-Packard's customers, realize hybrid solutions, hybrid delivery models. I think one holy grail that people have talked about, and this is more my opinion, the notion of bursting. Oh, I'm running here, I ran out of CPUs, quick run onto some public CPU and then come back to my own CPU. That works great for compute-intensive operations, but if you think about, if you've got a lot of data, where does the data go when you're bursting? You can do the back-up calculations, but to upload terabytes of data or to move it from place to place is non-trivial. So SneakerNet is still a lot faster, and the large companies are understanding that, and you bring your disk drive. That's how you burst your data. You don't just flex it kind of dynamically back and forth. So it's important to keep that in mind as you think of solutions or really create ideas, and there's a sticky point there that you have to watch out for. The public cloud, and I'm part of the public cloud team representing this top blue line, the marketplace. We've all seen these pictures. IaaS is the bottom layer, infrastructure. I've heard it said, and this is not a quote from Hewlett-Packard, but standing up servers now is so 1990s. So let's move to the next layers of the stack. Certainly, Salesforce, Amazon, the other companies are all doing that, and that's loosely called platform as a service. So if it's not an application, And it's not your bare metal infrastructure, compute, storage, block storage, content delivery network kind of stuff. It must be PaaS by definition. So that's the platform stuff in between. And it's important to understand that there are ecosystems. Salesforce has developed one, Amazon has one. These are the partners that come on board, and this is where the entrepreneurs can really add value. In these middle layers between the basic iron, let the big companies do the heavy lifting on big servers and network and all of that sort of stuff. Develop applications, but equally important, and I'll talk to some of you about that this evening, there are a lot of applications that if you think about it logically, you could cut them in half. The presentation is fundamentally separate from the logic. And if you can find ways to expose that logic as an entrepreneur, as an application developer, you may have the opportunity to let numerous other application developers rest on your intellectual property. It's just something to think about. I can play with that, thoughts about that a little bit later. We don't have time for me to dive into it. But what Hewlett Packard is saying, if you can get your head around that model, we will create a marketplace for those APIs, for those technologies that you have, and find a way to monetize those with you in higher level applications, SaaS applications that our customers or your customers are interested in doing. So it's a little complicated. Find me afterwards, but think in terms of what's the API level, what's the presentation level, and APIs run nicely in cloud. Presentation, let 1,000 developers tackle your intellectual property. It's a twist for the entrepreneur that Hewlett Packard is planning to differentiate on, frankly, in the marketplace. This is a little sales pitch for what we did announce. There is cloud compute available, object storage, basic S3 type things, a content delivery network. The company's made an agreement with Akamai, so one of the world's leading CDNs, available to public cloud developers who are on HP's infrastructure. Block storage is announced, that's in a private beta, and then a relational database. So the company is starting. We've got a good foot in the door, and it's early in this game. So you'll see quite a bit more from Hewlett Packard, building these basic blocks, and then working with entrepreneurs, working with startups, working with established companies to bring in platform opportunities or software as a service on top of this layering. I was asked to talk about Amazon. Some of the things are companies, Microsoft, Hewlett Packard. We tend to not talk about competitors as much as perhaps people would like. It's just the way the industry has to work. But we're happy to let the press talk for us. And so here's, let's focus on this bottom quote. HP's cloud vision is different from Amazon's, and I think I've alluded to that. Amazon is the end game, cloud. Bring your applications. Hewlett Packard is really seeing meeting the needs of enterprise customers who are migrating or transforming. Frank, you had a slide up earlier, 1970s, 1980s style applications. I was talking to one customer, one of our large customers, Thomas. We have 25,000 applications. Think about that, 25,000 applications. They've been building them since 1970, so you do the math, 40 years, what do you do, 500 a year? How does that work? But that's what they've done, one a day. But they're asking companies, you, us, whoever will listen and help them, how do we migrate, how do we transform these applications from DOS in some cases, client server in some cases, who knows what, to this modern infrastructure where, as was rightly noted, the employees or the end users are showing up with, I'd love to say touchpad, but I can't say that anymore, but they show up with iPads, their Android-powered devices, their iOS-powered devices, and they're saying, this is what we want to work with. It's the same phenomenon that happened with PCs, where everything was locked in the computer room, and the PCs broke in and freed, the computing for the rest of us stuff. And I was at Apple during that time frame, so I can talk from experience. And now it's happening again with these mobile devices. And so I've got a DOS application in a data center. My constituents are asking for something else. How do we collectively, as an industry, help them move forward? And there's a lot of money falling out of trees to make that happen, because these are often business-critical applications that need to transform. So that's where HP wants to play. It's not about standing up servers or services or API wars. It's really about helping the industry transform to the next generation of computing. Thank you.
Hello. So I have a long list of questions, but I'll just ask a few of them and then have you guys ask. I'm sure you have a bunch of questions that you want to ask this audience, these panelists. I got to start with you, Tom. The big announcement a week and a half ago, Citrix saying that they'll submit Cloud Stack to Apache, and the fact that essentially there's a VMware ecosystem, and the whole industry had sort of congregated around OpenStack, an alternate cloud OS, and Citrix said, no, we don't want to do that. We want to go after, put Cloud Stack, their own acquisition, into the open source community. So, just curious about.
Sure. So, I didn't mention this, but Hewlett-Packard's made a significant commitment to OpenStack. So, OpenStack is an infrastructure software layer. It's open source. And today, the OpenStack consortium announced a number of OpenStack partners, including Hewlett-Packard. You'll have to read the press announcement. I might get some of these wrong, but the likes of IBM, Dell was in there as a gold partner. Hewlett-Packard's a platinum partner. There are probably 13 or 20 or so leading computing companies. You've heard of all of these names. There are very few that are small. So there is tremendous momentum growing behind this OpenStack. Citrix is also entering the open source world, and frankly, the notion here is customers are coming to us, to Hewlett-Packard, and saying, as we make these transformations that I was talking about, we want to avoid vendor lock-in. And so when they hear about open source, in their minds, it's no vendor lock-in. We can move from Rackspace OpenStack to HP's OpenStack to back to Rackspace if Hewlett-Packard turns out to not be the best partner. And so the company, Hewlett-Packard's endorsing that and embracing it in a huge way. And one more to the party is fine. This is the early on in the game, and we'll see how things sort out. Our customers will dictate which platforms to run out. That's where it is right now.
So you guys are continuing on your OpenStack path?
Absolutely. And you'll see, the marketplace will see OpenStack migrate into Hewlett-Packard's offerings in the private cloud and in the managed cloud space, so that we, the company, can then help our customers have the choice. You want to run a private, it's the same software stack over time. It's an evolutionary process. We'll move. You want a private, great. You want this app over here, fine. The same knowledge that's in your programmer's brains, the same management concept that just transitions along.
Thanks. And this is probably to Karun and Anshu. There's this whole notion of IT ops going to DevOps, going to NoOps, as the PaaS platforms become richer and richer and richer, and where there's very little time spent on administration. You just code your application, don't worry about how it's deployed and managed and administered and so on. Where do you think we are on that spectrum of NoOps, and maybe there's a better word for it, could you guys comment on that?
You want to take it? I'll take it.
I
All right. So for a few that are not the fan of NoOps and everything else, let me explain what that means. So when you have your applications, take a simple example. Let's say you build an application to manage TiE registration, right? So some volunteer somewhere, poor guy, is basically keeping our website up to date, right? Someone is making sure there's a database, maybe it's MySQL, maybe it's SQL Server, maybe whatever it is up and running. It's making sure that there's an application server, so when you send registration, when you paid your payment today, it's calling an API from 1 to 3 sign up. All of those pieces have to work together, but for them to work together, first you have to do is, let's say you want to change that because TiE is no longer the Indus Entrepreneurs, it's transformation ideas and entrepreneurship or whatever. In that case, if you want to change just that one thing, typically in traditional software development model, what we would have done is an engineer, quote unquote, sits somewhere and basically makes that change in a string file, in a Java file or Ruby file or whatever the hell he's using, or 4GL system. And then a quality engineer tests that, and then he pushes that into what is called a staging environment. And then in a staging environment, you test that. And once everything is working fine, then you basically move that into a production environment. What that means to you is three things. One is that one change that I described, which sounds like a silly change to make, might take a month because there are 14 other tasks that have to be pushed ahead of you, right? You may be actually doing a cloud panel there and there's a registration task. So like someone who's in that operations business is basically telling you, hold on. It's like a train, right? You can only get on the train so fast. So what's happened now is, so that's the state of the industry, that's the state of the art, right? And what that means is it has two costs. It's what I call time, TTC, total time to change and total cost of change. You've heard the words TCO before. I created my own. It's called TCC, total cost of change. So the total cost of change for you making that simple one string change is actually not one string change. It's basically the time taken, say 4 hours by each of these guys, and the time it takes to actually push that change through. And that could be, tens of thousands of dollars for someone, or it could be hundreds of volunteer hours. So what the DevOps movement is doing, or what platform as a service is doing, like Heroku or Force.com, is in our case what we say, hey, you just make the change, you push a button and the change shows up. There is nothing really for you to do. What does that mean for you? Basically not only save time, but since everything is running in the same cloud, whether you're testing it or whether you're deploying it, it's basically the same environment. And you don't have to buy 2 servers in dev and 4 in stage and 4 in production. And even, by the way, when you do all of due diligence and buy 18 servers from whoever, you're not assured that when it's running in your production environment, no dings at you, no matter who you do it with, it's the same thing, right? So you're still not sure it's going to work fine, right? So what this platform as a service evolution is doing is basically saying, hey, you don't need to do all that. You don't need this sophisticated 15-step process to make small changes. You can continuously change your application. There's an idea of continuous push. So for some of you have heard of a thing called GitHub, for example, right? It's a source code repository. You basically push your change to the source code repository, then you push the change to production. It all happens in minutes and hours. I'll give you an example. Chrysler ran a halftime ad during Super Bowl. They built an application on our Salesforce platform for basically people to come and interact with their social graph. You could go there and basically leave comments and basically see who else was talking about this thing. While the Super Bowl was going on, they found out there were 3 optimizations they could make to basically drive more traffic and make the experience more rich. They actually had the guts to live push 3 changes while the Super Bowl was going on. There are very few businesses out there. You could be running a very, very large company who have the capability today to make changes in real time. So that's what DevOps to NoOps means in real business terms. Sorry for the long answer, but I thought people may not know what DevOps is.
That was good, actually.
So I completely agree with this. I think what's happening is that you're seeing a compression in terms of efficiency. We're taking out a lot of the inefficiencies in building and deploying applications. I will approach the answer from a different perspective, which is not just the workflow of building and deploying and managing and configuring applications, but what about enhancements? The example that Anshu was just giving about if you want to add new functionality to an application, how quickly can I get it out there? How quickly can I build it? And how quickly can it go live? So the approach, the different angle to that is, can we build a PaaS that has richer and richer services that work out of the box, and you can just plug in and you know it will work. You don't have to worry about testing it. There's very few things that have to be tested in the entire application stack, because the only thing that needs to be tested is your bit of the application stack, because the rest of the services come out of the box. So that's what I meant earlier about the set of composable services that are core to the platform, things like identity, things like messaging, things like queuing, all those things that you want to use to build the application-specific functionality. If they're available, that will further compress the amount of time required to enhance and push out new application changes.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, so I got to ask about this third question. Is actually a broader question. I work for Ericsson, and so our customers are the telcos, and they sort of know that they are anxious to get a piece of the cloud pie, right? And so I'm just curious, where do you see the AT&Ts and the Verizons adding value in this whole? You have your mobile devices, your phones, your tablets, and then you have your data centers. But there's stuff in between that needs to be very good.
You want the honest answer or the HP answer? I'm just kidding. No, I think there's a difference of perspectives. I believe that, and this is my personal view, I believe that, looking at these things as markets is kind of like a silly idea, right? Like you've seen lots of big companies, companies like Data General and DEC and all these. They saw a market for personal computers. They saw a market for cloud. Someone is seeing a market for social. When you run after markets, I think you're basically destined to disaster, right? Because how many of people here are looking to buy a cloud today? Anybody? Anybody bought a cloud lately? Okay, nobody buys a cloud. So nobody is looking to buy a cloud, and this notion that, oh my God, there's a $100 billion cloud market and maybe I can make 1% of it so I can capture $1 billion is somewhat a silly notion. I think the focus has to be, what are the business users, what are the CIOs, what are the customers really wanting to do? And from our perspective, they want to build business applications faster and deliver them on devices that are in the hands of the consumers and their employees and their partners. And you go to a doctor's office, you see he's like writing stuff on chart, and when you go back, he's going to ask you the same stupid question he asked you last time. Are you taking your medicines on time? Are you diabetic? Well, like I told you last time, can't you just do a search? So these business application platforms don't have search built in. But from a telco perspective, I can completely understand they want to make money. So I think the value add for them is going to be selling capacity to you, right? They're going to be selling, there's going to be more bits flowing between my device and between the cloud, whether it's HP's or Salesforce's or Microsoft's. So they'll make money as a result. They will actually build these Terramark kind of companies, basically offering you virtualized hosted environments so that you can take your existing applications and basically host them in the cloud. So that's a huge opportunity for them. But I don't think that's transformation. It doesn't really change my life if how many of you would notice if your email server was, instead of being hosted in like Rutgers, in Charlotte, was hosted in someone else's data center, hosted by a telco or not a telco. Like, I don't care. Like, it would matter to me if my application suddenly became available on an iPhone.
Well, it's really because of the employees of AT&T or perhaps Verizon or somebody else would care, right? When it's part of the it's the
yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's focused on like what's in there for me,
sure,
rather than like what's happening out there.
So Tom and Karen, any comments?
Sure. It's an interesting question. The telcos, the carriers, the service providers, what we call them in Hewlett Packard. First of all, it's a huge customer. So however you count the market sizing, it's billions of dollars of something that these people are buying.
Right.
These service providers are buying, and either to run their own infrastructure, because we still are making phone calls, and doing web browsing over somebody's infrastructure, so that they're enabling the cloud, and or they're enabling the applications, I guess, or the basic infrastructure that's running there. The piece of the puzzle is, and I think from an Ericsson perspective, I'm not sure how it works with you all, but there are a lot of opportunities for these carriers, these service providers, to call on small, medium businesses to provide services where the small, medium business has no idea. You're right, they're not buying a cloud, they want to buy an application. And to the extent that a service provider can aggregate these applications and run it over their wire and present that customer as a small, medium business with a single bill that says you use so much of this and so much of that, there's value there to that customer. And so there are ways to play for them, but that's more than just being a dumb pipe, which is the big fear that a lot of carriers might have. But again, it's a dynamically changing world, and big companies are often slow to change. So there are challenges on all fronts.
Thank you.
I was going to just add a little bit, which is, I think Anshu is a realist, and I'll try to be an idealist and optimist, and think maybe what are the other possibilities that are possible. And I think Tom alluded to a couple of them. One is, let's look at, if you're a telco, on the one hand you've got device makers, you don't control that. On the other hand, you've got cloud operators, you don't control that. All you control is the dumb pipe, as you said. So how do you extract value from that? I think one way obviously is to maybe segment it based on quality of service. Guarantee certain levels of quality of service, certain kinds of applications. You do control the pipe, but you can control the rate, you can control the quality. Just charge more, right? For certain levels of quality. The other one is, of course, like as you mentioned also, is because you own the last mile, you own the customer relationship, you have the ability to do unified billing, which is a huge win for them, at least for the small and medium businesses, because that's what they would like, a simple solution. And as a result of that, you can attract application ecosystems and be able to monetize that way. So I think that those would be the things that I would look at.
Good, thanks. Let's now talk about Amazon a little bit, because they're the sort of 800-pound gorilla that's not in the room here, not in the panel at least. Number of all of you actually have some kind of relationship with Amazon. You run, Force.com runs on. Well, there's you can interface with the Amazon Web Service and so on. Is that just marketing, or is there some applications that are actually spanning your two companies?
Oh, I mean, the beauty of being in the cloud is, let's say you decide to build your, order management application in HP's cloud tomorrow morning, and you want to run your, your order status interface application, which is, has a social feed attached to it and is available on an iPad on us, and you want to store the data in Microsoft SQL Azure, there was this whole era of service-oriented architectures. If any of you either made money or lost money in that whole generation, I spent 10 years doing this SOA, and the problem with SOA was, since everything was within the data center, everybody cheated, right? So you spent $10-20 million building this enterprise service bus. There was like an architecture committee, remember those things? And then at the end of the day, they're like, oh my god, the data is too slow, or it's going to take us 2 months if we go through the API. I can just make a DB link call. And they're like, okay, just do that, but don't tell anybody. Like, we'll have a service orientation program later on. Now the beauty of being cloud oriented, and this is where I think private cloud versus public cloud is fundamentally different, and even this DevOps thing, right? So if you're running in